Hi everybody, today I want to do a little demonstration on how to throw a tabletop or a countertop compost bin. So the first thing I want to do is I've got about 3 or 4 pounds of clay here, and I'm going to throw the little slab that my bat sits on. Because I don't tend to use bat pins, mostly because, I don't know, they always get wobbly for me. The holes in the bats wear out, and then you've got wiggly bats, and I've just always kind of preferred this method, so I'll show you folks how to do this method. I'm going to center up the clay. It's not super critical that it be perfect, and so I'm going to spread this out as if I were making a plate. Just going to make a slab on the wheel here, like so. I happen to be making a new one right now, but I usually just make these and then I just leave them on my wheel and I cover them in plastic, and they're good for at least a couple days before they get too dry. And so notice this has a little bit of a cup to it, so it's higher at the rim than it is in the middle, and you kind of want that. Alright, so I'm going to take a bat now, slow down my wheel here, and tap center my bat on there, like so. Give it a couple good thunks. Now, I am one of those people who doesn't prefer to clean their bats. I just scrape off the clay. I always use the same type of clay, so I really don't see much point in carefully washing my bats. I just stack them back up again and start anew. So I've got about 10.5 pounds of clay here. We're gonna get that down, and I'm now beginning to center. Especially when you're centering large amounts of clay like this, it's important to let the wheel do the work and to use the mechanical advantage provided by your body and not try to use your hand or your arm strength to do this. I lean into my centering, so when I lean forward, my elbow is braced into my hip, and when I lean forward, it's almost like a scissor motion, where I'm folding in at the waist, and that allows me to use my whole body weight to push the heel of my hand into center. So I'm not actually really exerting very much energy, or putting that much effort into that move. So do that a few more times here. And you could make these any size you wanted to. I think that this will probably turn out to be about right, because you don't want to have to empty it so often, but you also don't just want a garbage can sitting on your countertop kind of thing. Somewhere in between. So now, when throwing really big cylinders like this, I think it's very important to get the base of the centered lump to be the size that you want the base of the pot to be. Because that really kind of goes for any pot, but if you have a narrower lump and then you try to open and stretch out your bottom further, you're going to get this weird overhang situation happening that really weakens the wall of your pot. And so get your base to be the right diameter, maybe even a little bit more. See, I actually kind of messed up there. I already opened, but we can work with that. And rather than trying to force this open, I'm actually going to use my index and ring finger on my left hand and my thumb on my right hand, reverse that if you're left-handed, to kind of just cut across the bottom like this. Like so. And that actually is a lot easier to do than trying to move all that clay at once. I'm using this side of my thumb here and this side of this thumb just kind of like working together to kind of smooth out that base. You know, that's probably a move that isn't really common. I don't know, I guess I kind of, that's what works for me. Say it that way. So, on wide, flat bottoms like this, compression is your friend. If you don't compress these bottoms, cracks will show up if you want them or not, and they're really never wanted. Especially if you're not making something like a flower pot, because having that hole in the middle kind of relieves some of the stress and tension that happens when it's drying. So flower pots actually tend to crack less just because of that hole in the middle. But for something like this, I overkill it on the compression because it's an expensive item to have crack. $10 in clay plus your firing cost. Alright, I think that's probably about good. I like to leave a little swirl in there. It's not really my trademark, but I do like to leave them in. And so now, my first pull, if this were larger, I would do a heel of the left hand pull, but it's kind of not necessary for this. I'm going to do a knuckle pull over here. So I'm just going to kind of bring this clay up and in. And it's always an up and in thing. I'm always erring towards the side of making kind of like an inward volcano than an outward bowl, because that clay can be so hard to get back in again once it's out, but it'll always voluntarily just, you know, go bowl shaped if you want it to. Alright, so I'm going to do another pull here like so. And this is one of those things where you're thinking about your height, or the height that you want in your pot. It's kind of now is when that becomes important, because you don't really a tall, narrow cylinder for this kind of thing. You know, maybe 1.5 times as tall as it is wide, no more, I would say. Okay, it's starting to get dry on the inside, so I'm just actually going to stop that pull right there. That's one thing that I tell my students a lot, is that you can always just stop your pull right in the middle of what you're doing, and then find your spot again, because it's better to do that than it is to continue without water, for sure. So I think grab a little bit more out of the base there. There we go. So get my side straight here. We're actually coming out a little bit at the top. I'm going to go back in again here. Alright, now I'm going to remove this excess clay here down near the bat. Kind of clean up that edge there, because that's actually going to end up being a finished surface there. I'm not going to trim these, because they're kind of like heavy crockery and they don't really require that kind of treatment. I'll just wire them off nicely and then clean up the bottoms later. Get all the water out of the bottoms, and then I'm going to kind of compress my rim using this portion of my hand here, and just compress the rim, fix the shape there a little bit. And so now's the time where I would decide whether or not I want to do like a little banding detail or something like that. I think that I'm probably going to give these a blue line with cobalt later for just like a super traditional, like kind of farmhouse look. I'm not even going to do any inscribed detail on these right now. measure the inside diameter of my circle here, which is, if my tape measure weren't all covered in clay, it'd be easy to read, 8 5/8 inches. This is the wire I'm going to use to cut off. This is a wiggle wire. That's a stretched out spring, so I'm going to give the wheel just a little spin here. And we're just going to go right under there like that, and that'll make a fun little pattern on the bottom side. Alright, we're going to pry that off. So now, I'm going to go in with another bat here, and we'll make the lid. Get rid of that. A little moisture going on here. So now for the lid. The lid is going to get thrown upside down, and it's going to be a nearly flat lid. It's going to have a little bit of an arch to it on the inside, and then later I will trim the outside to meet. So I'll explain that further here as we move along with this. This clay was sitting on my dry table over here, so the part that was touching the table dried out, so I got to kind of wheel wedge this a little bit, going up and down a few more times than I normally would, if I had been so smart as to keep my clay in a bag. So we need about 9 1/4 inches of width. So I'm just gonna, again, make a plate here. That's 9 inches. I'm just going to go out a little bit further here as I kind of compress the bottom. Or compress, I guess this is the top, but you know what I mean. And this thickness here is kind of important. You never want your lids to be too thin, because they can sag in the kiln. So that's kind of pushing it a little bit here. I'm going to take some of this excess material here. I'm going to push that in to make up for that just a little bit. That extra 1/8 of an inch can save you a lot of heartache later when you go to wire this off and the wire doesn't come through, or you go to trim it and there's actually something there to trim. Let's see. Yeah, so we're pretty much at the right width. So I'm going to come over here like this, and I'm going to push down this rim here, like so, just a little bit, to make a little step there. And this step should be at 8 5/8 inches, which it's not. It needs to move out some, because that's what's actually going to sit on the inside of our pot and register with the inside of the pot to make sure that the lid isn't going to slide off of this jar. And so sometimes when I have big wide flat lids like this, I actually don't glaze them on top, and I just fire them this way around so that they don't sag. But this one's going to get a handle, so that's not going to be a possibility. But that is an option if you find that your big flat lids sag in the middle when they're fired upright. This arch in here really helps fight that a lot. So we went a little too far here, which is actually good, because now when I come back in I get a little more height on this lid. That looks about perfect. We're gonna have this live right there like that. And then this edge here, the middle. This edge here I'm going to trim underneath just a little, and that gets me started for when I trim the whole top of this lid. So this one does not get a wiggle wire because the goal is to retain as much of our material as possible. And don't do that. I nicked the side of it there with my wire. There we go. It's always a little scary when you can see the wire through the clay, but there's still plenty of material there. Now if I hadn't wired this off, I would flip this over and show you how it goes on top. But here's the pot. And you can imagine that this lid goes like so on there. So I think it's always good to show just a little bit of results. So that's how that lid fits on top of that pot there. And I was able to stick it back down to the bat and flip it around so that I can hold on to it by the bat and show you, because it's way too tacky to pick up and way too floppy. But if it's stuck to the bat, you can do that. So that's the way that looks in the end. All right, folks, thanks for watching. I'll probably go ahead and trim these for next week's video. Take care.